Well, good morning, Bay Shore. You guys excited to be at church today? It is a good day to be at church, and if we haven't met before, my name is Cotter, and I am the Next Steps pastor here. And when I was growing up, my siblings and I went to a small Christian school over in Laurel called Epworth. And it was a great school, made a lot of good memories there, really enjoyed my time there. But the one thing about that school is that it had some very, what's a nice word, interesting rules. Very interesting rules. And so we had a dress code, and I'll show you the dress code. This was our dress code. I think in the handbook it said awkward is what you had to look like. And so we had the button downs. This is my siblings and I, and so I'm the most awkward in the photo, the little one. And so we had to have khaki pants. We had to have button down shirts. We had to wear dress belts and dress shoes, and it was so fun. And so that was part of the dress code. We also, as guys, we were not allowed to have our hair cover the bottom of our ears, like down here. You also could not have it touch your collar. I grew my hair out down to here as soon as I graduated high school and kept it that way for years. So we just had so many different rules about that, and different rules about hair too. And so you also were not allowed to dye your hair at all, and that included like bleaching your hair. Now, I went to school here in the early 2000s, and every punk band was bleaching their hair. And so I wanted to bleach my hair. And I did one time, and they made me cut it all off, which is a huge bummer. And speaking of punk bands, we had kids at our school that got suspended because they went to a Green Day concert at night. They didn't skip school. They went to it at night. Green Day isn't even a good band. Think about that. Get suspended for going to see a band that's not even that good. And they didn't get in a fight. They didn't skip school. They just did that one evening. And we also learned some alternate names for things in Christian school. And so we can put up the next photo. This, we learned this is the Hoover Darn. It's a close relative of the Beaver Darn. And yeah, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but sometimes in church it feels like there's things that we're not allowed to talk about. And it feels like some things are just completely off limits to discuss. And so we like to open the floor to all of your questions each year so that you have an opportunity to ask anything that is on your mind. And so next week, Pastor Joel is doing his Ask Me Anything sermon. And here's how it's going to work. You guys will text in your questions to this number, and that number comes right to me. And nobody else sees these questions. If you're familiar with the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, these questions are for my eyes only. I'm the only one that sees them. And so your questions will also stay anonymous. So I'm the only one on the staff team that will see these. Nobody else sees who sends them in. And so if you want to know why the person you sit next to on Sundays has bad coffee breath, you can send your question in. It is safe with me, and nobody else will see that. And another cool part of this is that Joel's not going to see any of these questions until he is right here on the stage next Sunday morning. No prep time, but he is just going to be up here, and he's just going to answer whatever questions come his way. And the questions are going to be fresh every service. So the questions at the 8:30 are different from 9:45, and those are also different from the 11 o'clock service. So it's going to be a really fun Sunday. Hopefully we can answer some of the questions that you guys have about life, about faith, maybe just questions about Joel and the church. But to fill up 3 services worth of questions, we need you guys to send in some questions. We're hoping to have about 60 questions right now. We're closer to like 15 or 20. So we need you guys to send some questions in early part of this week. That would be amazing. And then be here next Sunday. And if you're not, if you're on the road and you're traveling, or maybe you go to a corn maze next Saturday, you get stuck, you can't find your way out, you get really confused, well, you can always be a part of church online. And that's why we got the Church Center app and YouTube. We got a crew that watches online every week. So can we make some noise for our online family? So this past Monday morning, our kids were sitting at the table eating breakfast. And Mondays are so stressful. Is Monday a stressful day for anybody else? It is such a stressful day. And so Monday mornings are such a challenge. Emily's headed to work. I'm headed to work. Our kids are headed in two different directions. One goes to school. One goes to my parents' house. And just so many things to remember and accomplish on Monday mornings before we leave the house. And so last Monday morning, I'm running around trying to remember all the things we need. And I went out to the car to turn it on. And I come back inside, and our kids are sitting at the kitchen table, eating peanut butter toast, and they are singing Christmas carols. In September, they're singing The Little Drummer Boy. And so we just leaned all the way in, and I turned on Andy Williams on Spotify, and we just listened to all the Christmas carols we could. And so the whole drive to school, the kids were asking all these Christmas questions. They're like, hey, when are we going to put the tree up? When are we going to throw all the pumpkins away? When is it going to start snowing outside? And it was still September. It was crazy. And isn't it true that sometimes we get so focused on future things that we miss out on what's happening right now? We start thinking about what life will look like when the kids move out, or when we get to retirement, or when we just get through this next busy time, and we miss out on all of the cool things that are happening in the moment. And so we're in week 2 of this series called Joyful, and I believe that one of the things in life that empties our joy is looking ahead and missing out on what is happening in our lives right now. Whether we are frustrated with our situation in life or just too focused on something exciting that's coming in the future, it's easy for us to miss out on the good things that are happening around us. So let's open our Bibles this morning. We're going to start in the New Testament book of Philippians. We're going to be in chapter 4. If you need a Bible, we've got free Bibles out in the lobby right next to the coffee. Grab some more coffee and grab a free Bible. And we'll also have our verses on the screen this morning as well. So we'll hop in here, Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 11. It says, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. So this book was written by the Apostle Paul, and when he wrote this letter, he was a prisoner in Rome. And so Paul is sitting in a prison cell writing this letter, and here he's saying that he's learned to be content in whatever situation he is in. Whether things are going well or whether he is struggling, he has learned to be content at all times. Now, being able to say that you're content in all circumstances, that's amazing, but saying it when you're in jail, that is so powerful. And I'm not sure how you guys feel, but personally, I can't say that I'm content in every situation. Not at all. I think there are a lot of positive moments in life where it's easier to be content, but when things are challenging, it is a struggle to be content. So I'm amazed at what these verses say, and contentment, that's something that I want more of for my life. Now, to be content, that is to be satisfied, to be thankful and fulfilled with life in the present moment. And what Paul is saying is that he's found a way to be satisfied and to be fulfilled no matter what's happening in life. And there aren't many times in life where everything aligns perfectly, where everyone we know is healthy, where our finances and our relationships are all in a good spot, where every task is complete, every dish is washed, every kid's toy is picked up, the meals are prepped, the oil's been changed in the cars. All of those things don't happen at the same time very often. So being content, it's not about having a perfect life or being in a perfect situation. Contentment is being fulfilled and thankful even though things aren't perfect. Contentment is being fulfilled and thankful even though things aren't perfect. There's always going to be some good things and some bad things going on. We could always have a bigger house, a car with fewer miles, or even a car that starts every time you want it to. We could always have more free time and less bills, but being content is about being satisfied even though things aren't perfect. And Paul being in prison, that's certainly not a time in his life where his situation was perfect, but he was satisfied and content because of his faith. And so he could say, whether I have nothing or whether I have everything, I can be fully satisfied and fulfilled. Look at this next verse with me. We'll put this on the screen. This is verse 13. And it says, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Paul says, I've learned to be content in all situations. And then he says, I can do this because Jesus gives me the strength to. Jesus gives us the strength too as well. So we can be content in any situation because of Jesus. We can be satisfied and fulfilled. We can be at peace in any situation because of Jesus. And I think for Paul, what gave him this perspective of life was all the time that he had lived in his life without Jesus. He spent years of his life in opposition to Christianity. He would go around and he would round up Christians and he would get them and he would put them in jail. He was against Christianity for much of his life, and so he knew what it was like to live without Jesus, to be empty, to lack fulfillment, to lack purpose and hope. And he knew how unsatisfying that was. And so when his life was changed, when he encountered Jesus, he experienced peace that he never had before. He learned that Jesus gave up his life for him. He learned about the eternity in heaven that awaits everyone who lives for Jesus. And that helped put things in perspective for him because regardless of his circumstances, he knew that Jesus loved him. He felt God's love and God's peace every day. And he knew that an eternity of peace and joy awaited him when his days on this earth were over. So he was in prison and he could still be content because he was focused on the bigger picture. And focusing on the bigger picture, that is something that's encouraging to me. That's also challenging to me because I don't look at life through the big picture most times. I tend to look at life through tasks. I need to get the laundry done. I need to get the dishes done. I need to get the grass cut. I need to paint the sheds. There's always a box that's unchecked, a task that's left unfinished. But Paul's view of life puts things into such great perspective. He's saying things are rarely going to be perfect in this life, but that should not stop us from being content. We shouldn't rush away our days in anticipation of some event that's happening in a week or a month or a year because God has placed us right here. And we only get to be right here in this moment one time. So we make the most of today by being present in the moment we're in right now. Even in struggles and in pain and in grief, we can find the positives in our situation right now because we have breath in our lungs. We have forgiveness in Jesus. We have the hope and promise of eternity. Life doesn't need to be perfect today because we know there's a day in the future where it all will be. We only get to experience today once, and being content is how we make the most of that. Now, I want us to check out a story from the Old Testament, and there's so much value in pairing the New Testament of the Bible with the Old Testament. It is all God's Word. It all is full of value. And so what we're about to read is following the Israelites. And we can wait a moment on that slide real quick. So we're going to be following the Israelites, and these were God's chosen people. And for many years, they lived in Egypt as slaves. Their slavery was rough. They were doing hard labor. It was just a really bad situation for them. And so God wanted to rescue them. So to do that, he brought along Moses and his brother Aaron. And so after some time, God miraculously frees the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, and that's where we're picking up today. These people had been freed, and they were out in the desert. So let's check this out. This is verse 1 from the book of Exodus, chapter 16. It says, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. There's a lot of places, there's a lot of numbers in this verse that aren't very familiar to us, but the important thing to see here is that it says this was the 15th day of the second month of the year. And if we look in the Bible over to the book of Numbers, it tells us that the Israelites left Egypt on the 15th day of the first month of the year. So they'd been out of slavery at this point for 1 month. 1 month they had been out of slavery, and that's very important. Let's hop back in with verse 2. Verse 2 says, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you've brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. The Israelites crack me up sometimes. Like they were so upset about their food that they were eating and the lack of food that they were getting that they tell Moses and Aaron that they wish they were just dead. They wish they had never escaped Egypt. And something we were taught back in seminary is that when you're reading the Bible, sometimes there's an example you want to follow, someone who is doing a great job, shows us a path that we want to follow, like Paul being in prison, saying that we should be content and finding contentment in prison. That's a great example that we want to follow. Other times, There's people in the Bible who completely miss the mark and show us an example that we want to avoid. And the Israelites right here are showing us an example of something that we want to avoid. And what we see in their actions are some attitudes that can rob us of contentment. Some ways of thinking that just completely took them off the rails, and ways of thinking that can take us off the rails as well. And so the first attitude that robs us of contentment is wanting what we don't have. Wanting what we don't have. We'll put verse 3 back on the screen. Verse 3 says, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. They said, man, we had it good in Egypt. We were just relaxing, sitting around, eating any food that we wanted. They were so frustrated with their food, that they completely forgot what life was actually like back in Egypt. They forgot about the forced slave labor that they did every single day. They forgot about their children being killed by Pharaoh. They looked back on their time in Egypt like it was this vacation where they were just relaxing and eating good food. And because their food was no longer the same, they let it overshadow how much better their lives were in this moment. The only thing they could think about was what they didn't have. Wanting things that we don't have robs us of our contentment. Because when we do that, we're saying, what I have isn't enough. What I have right now, it's not enough for me to be happy. To be happy, I need to have something else. I need a new car. I need a new phone. I need a bigger house or a bigger TV. What we're saying is, I'll be happy if I get this thing. And look, there's no object that's going to bring us lasting happiness. No object, no possession will actually satisfy us. Contentment, it's not about getting the next thing that we want. It's about appreciating what we have. It's about finding joy in our situation right now, not letting the imperfections of this moment overshadow the good things. Now, a few years ago for Christmas, we went to Disney with some family, and a couple days ago, my son Taj and I were looking at some of the photos from that trip, and we have one that we can put up on the screen. I love that photo of him. I think he was like a year and a half old at this time. And when I look at this photo, though, like I remember exactly how I felt in this moment. Exactly how I felt in this moment. It was freezing cold this day. Way colder than Florida should ever be. And so I was worried we didn't have enough warm clothes for our son. My wife was like 8 months pregnant at this time. So I was thinking about her and hoping she had enough warm clothes. And at this point of the afternoon, I was getting nervous that we weren't going to make it across the park for our dinner reservation. And our son was sick this day. So I was thinking about that. I was worried about getting back to the hotel on time for his bedtime. I had all of these things going on in my head in this moment. But when I looked back at this picture a couple of days ago, the first thing I noticed was just how incredible this moment was. Like we were in Florida with our son, hanging out in Disney. He got to meet Mickey Mouse and Tigger. He got to meet Darth Vader, which scared him so much. And it was so funny, but it scared him really bad. But he got to run around and watch the sunset with the castle behind him. Like it was just an incredible day. But when I was actually in that moment, I was so distracted by all these little things. And looking back, I wish I had just been more present in that moment. I wish I had been less distracted by all the things I needed to accomplish, the different stressors, all the things that were just going on in my head, and just more focused on being present, embracing that moment and embracing where I was at. Wanting what we don't have will rob us of our contentment. But finding joy in our situation right now will help us to be more present and more appreciative of every moment that we're in. Look back at verse 3 with me again. In verse 3 it says, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. The Israelites said, you have brought us out into this desert to die. The Israelites are talking to Moses and Aaron. And if you remember, Moses and Aaron are the two people that God used to rescue them out of their slavery in Egypt. And so the Israelites are telling these two men who rescued them that they are trying to starve them to death. They're unhappy with their situation, and so they're blaming the very men who saved them. And that's the second attitude that robs us of our contentment. Blaming other people. Blaming other people. How often do we have a bad day and we feel the need to blame it on someone else? I'd be having a great day at work if it weren't for Sherry, who doesn't know how to do her job right. I can enjoy my kid's soccer game if the coach even knew what soccer was. I wouldn't be so miserable on Sunday afternoons if my football team would stop losing every weekend. Now listen, I'm an Eagles fan. I don't really know what that's like. A lot of Eagles fans. It's been a long time since the Eagles have lost. I kind of forget that feeling. But listen, we talk about the Eagles a lot, and so I wrote that because I want the Ravens fans to be included. And you guys have losing on lockdown right now, so I just wanted you to feel. But we all do this, right? We're always blaming someone for something. And so here's what happens when we do that. We end up focusing on the negative things about someone else rather than being present in the moment that we're in. Instead of appreciating our situation, looking at ways that we're blessed, taking in the moment, we're not doing any of that. We're just complaining about someone else. And I think when we do that, our thought is that if I blame this person, I'll feel better about my situation. But does that ever work? No. What happens is we just get ourselves in this cycle of focusing on the negatives instead of appreciating the moment. Instead of appreciating the good and the bad, we're just trying to find someone to blame. And that robs us of our contentment. Let's look back at verse 3 one more time. It says, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. The Israelites said, if only we had died in Egypt, everything would be better. How crazy is that? If they had died in Egypt, it wouldn't be better. They'd just be dead. Dead is not better. Dead is not better than being blessed and being rescued by God. The lie they believed is that if their circumstances were different, they'd be happier. And that's the third attitude that robs us of our contentment. Wishing our circumstances were different. Wishing our circumstances were different. Isn't it true that sometimes you think, if I could just get a different job, my life would be better? And if I could just get to retirement, my life would be better. If I could just find someone to marry, my life would be better. We think that if we could just change up our situation, all of our problems would go away, and we'd finally be able to settle in and enjoy life. And listen, here's the truth. We have everything we need right now, in this moment, to be content. We do. We don't need our situation to be different. We read Philippians 4 earlier, and let's look back at this. I want to look back at verse 12 one more time. It says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I have learned the secret of being content. This verse says that contentment is something that we learn. It's something we learn because we learn that Jesus loves us. We learn that he has forgiveness for us. We learn that he has a plan for our lives. We learn that God is in control of all things. We learn that Jesus has an eternity of joy and perfection awaiting us after this life. We learn that every moment we get to experience is a gift from our Creator. And knowing those things, that's what allows us to be content. That's what allows us to be present in this moment. We can always find negatives in our situation. We can always find a reason to be frustrated and to rationalize why life would be better if our situation was different. But if we choose to be content, if we choose to be present and satisfied with where we're at right now, then we're going to appreciate the life that we have so much more. There's so much good in every day. We just need to choose to embrace it. So last weekend was a cool one for our family. One of Emily's brothers got married, and so we were able to celebrate that with our family and our friends. And weddings are great. You know, you get good food, get to connect with people that you haven't seen in a long time. But this wedding was the first one that we took our small children to. Normally we get childcare for a wedding, but since it was a family wedding, we needed them there for the photos and the entire experience. And when I say the entire experience, I literally mean the entire experience. And so I'm talking about the 3-hour rehearsal dinner that happened on Friday night. And that started right at their bedtime, on the dot. And then the 6-hour day of Saturday that included the wedding and the photos and the reception. And so we were going in prepared for this to be an adventure. And we were right. It was full of awkwardness, and it was just full of meltdowns. And so we get to Saturday, and the day starts out pretty good. The little guys did great during the photos, and they did really well waiting for the wedding to start. And then we all go in, and we're sitting in this sanctuary, and everything's looking good. And they seat us on the front row. That was a questionable decision. And so we're sitting in the front row, and the kids are doing good, and the groomsmen come in, and the bridesmaids come in, and everybody stands up as the bride comes down the aisle. And then there's this amazing moment where my brother-in-law is standing up there, and his soon-to-be wife is just a few feet in front of him, and they're just staring into each other's eyes. And that's the moment that our 2-year-old lost all of the self-control that he has, which is not much. And so we're sitting there on the front row, and he just started talking as loudly as he could. Who's that lady over there? Why does that guy have glasses on his face? Like, just as loudly as he could. And so I just got him, and I kind of scooted him in the aisle, and we sprinted down the back and got out of there. It was so embarrassing, like so embarrassing. And the whole day was a bit of a challenge, and a really good reminder of why we should never skip our kids' nap times. But there's this moment later in the day, everyone is at the reception, and they're eating food and catching up with family and friends. And we tried that for like 5 minutes, and then they were done with it. And so I'm just walking around the church with them, and I found the youth room at this church that we were at. And so I went back there with our kids, and I got a photo of them back there. This is the first time they had ever seen an air hockey table in their life. They were fascinated by the little air that comes out. When you turn it on, there's a little jingle that it would do. And so they're just, hopefully it still works. I mean, they're just flipping it on and off nonstop to hear that little jingle. And they were just so happy. And happy is definitely not in the top 20 words I would use to describe how I was feeling that day. Like, not at all how I was feeling. But their laughters and their smiles, it just kind of pulled me out of my tiredness and my stress. And it hit me how special that moment was. Like, I was exhausted, I was stressed out, but that was a really incredible moment. It was a special time with my kids. It was a great day for my brother-in-law and our family. There will always be things in life that stress us out. But being content, and we'll put this on the screen, being content is about being fulfilled and thankful, even though things aren't perfect. Contentment is about being fulfilled and thankful, even though things aren't perfect. We have a God that loves us so much. And because of his love and his forgiveness, we can be content in any situation. And I wonder how many more moments we would appreciate if we were embracing where we're at instead of looking forward. How many memories we would make if we were focused on being present instead of getting distracted by frustrations and stress. How many more of God's blessings we would see if we took a moment to slow down and enjoy where we're at. When we live for Jesus, we have so many reasons to be thankful, to be fulfilled, to be full of joy right now in this moment. It's about focusing on the blessings around us, letting go of the distractions, and embracing where God has placed us right now. We embrace the good and the bad, and we make the most of where we're at.